Henry Clarkson was never a man of many words, but one message, a 17-second voicemail, he never deleted. For years, that simple recording kept him company in the silence of his home, echoing the voice of someone long gone. This is a story about memory, loss, and the quiet power of words left behind. The Echoes of Silence. Henry Clarkson, 78 years old, lived in a quiet cul-de-sac on the outskirts of Marietta, a modest town in southern Ohio. The trees were tall and familiar, and the neighborhood kids had long since grown up and moved away, replaced by young couples and new families. But Henry remained. His home, a weathered two-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked with every breeze, stood like a quiet monument to the past. Inside, it smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The walls were lined with photographs, many of them black and white or slightly yellowed at the edges. Wedding photos, baby pictures, family trips to the lake. Margaret, his late wife, smiling under a sun hat. Rachel, their daughter, holding up a 4th of July sparkler, face full of joy. But despite the presence of memories, the house was still, the kind of stillness that only comes from too many years of solitude. The only regular sound was the ticking of a mantel clock and the occasional chirp from a sparrow at the window. Every Sunday morning, without fail, Henry would sit in his recliner in the front room. He'd make a pot of black coffee, 2 scoops of grounds, just like Margaret used to do, and toast a slice of rye bread. The paper would arrive at 6:30 a.m., and by 7, he'd have his magnifying glass in hand, squinting through bifocals to read the local obituaries and the crossword puzzle. But the real ritual came afterward. With the sun fully risen and the coffee nearly gone cold, he'd reach over to the dusty answering machine on the side table. The machine was outdated, a plastic relic from the late 90s with clunky buttons and a small red LED screen. It hadn't blinked in years, except for one message. Henry would press play. "Hey, Dad, it's me. Just wanted to say I love you. Call me back when you can." It was Rachel's voice. That was all. No drama, no desperation, just love. A simple message left 13 years ago, 2 days before the car accident that took her life. Henry never called back. He never got the chance, and he never forgave himself. That voicemail became something sacred. He never saved it to a USB drive, never transferred it to his computer. He didn't trust technology. The machine stayed plugged into the same wall socket, resting on the same table next to a picture of Rachel at age 10, front teeth missing, arms wrapped around a golden retriever named Rusty. Over the years, Henry developed a ritualistic relationship with that message. It grounded him. It was a moment he could return to, a frozen sliver of time where she was still alive, where things were still fixable. It was his penance and his comfort. Sometimes he smiled while listening. Sometimes he cried. Every time he whispered, "I love you too, baby." Henry had been known for his voice. A high school English teacher for over 3 decades, he once stood confidently in front of chalkboards, spinning stories out of Shakespeare, coaxing reluctant teenagers to care about metaphors and sonnets. He was witty, sharp, a little stern, but never unkind. His students remembered him as a man who cared more about honesty than grades. Grief, however, had worn him down like water on stone. When Margaret passed from cancer, slowly, painfully, Henry retreated inward. The illness had lasted 2 years. He was by her side every day, cooking her meals, reading aloud to her when she couldn't sleep, playing her favorite piano pieces on an old cassette tape. She had been his anchor, and when she was gone, he felt himself adrift. Rachel's death had been sudden. A car accident on a wet highway in Kentucky. She was 29, headed home from a conference. The phone rang at midnight. The voice on the other end belonged to a highway patrol officer. Henry remembered every word. After the funeral, Henry boxed up Rachel's belongings and stored them in the attic. It took him 3 years to open them again. When he did, he sat in the attic for hours, cross-legged like a child, sifting through her life. Her baby shoes, a cracked porcelain doll, ticket stubs from a concert they attended when she was 16, and a sketchbook filled with watercolors of birds and trees. At the bottom of the box was a letter. "Dad, it began. "Thank you for being tough when I needed it, and soft when I didn't know I did. I know we don't always say it, but I love you. You taught me how to be brave." Henry folded the letter carefully, pressed it to his lips, and placed it in the drawer beside her sketchbook. Outside the house, the only regular connection to the world came through the Martins, a young couple who had moved into the house next door 3 years ago. They had a daughter, Lily, who was 6, and liked to draw with chalk on Henry's sidewalk. She never asked permission. She just showed up, one spring morning, drawing hearts and smiley faces. Henry watched from his window, a mug of tea in hand. The next morning, he left a chocolate chip cookie on the porch. That became their ritual. She drew, he baked. Sometimes, Lily would wave at him through the window. Occasionally, she would leave a flower or a note in crooked handwriting. "Hope you smile today." Henry never spoke much to the Martins, but he appreciated their kindness. The world had changed around him, fast and loud. But Lily's drawings and Rachel's voicemail, those were his tethers. And so, quietly, Henry carried on. A man of few words, living in a house of echoes, holding tightly of the things that made him feel human. A visitor in the rain. It was a cold, wet afternoon in late October when the knock came at the door. Rain had been falling since morning, soaking the yellowing leaves that clung to the trees like the last pages of a forgotten book. Henry had just finished his crossword puzzle and was setting the kettle on the stove when the sound echoed through the house. 2 knocks, deliberate and firm. He wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no appointments. The Martins usually called first. He moved slowly, knees stiff from age and stillness, and opened the front door. Standing on the porch was a young man, no older than 30. He wore a navy blue raincoat, zipped to the chin, and a soaked backpack slung over one shoulder. His hair was dark and plastered to his forehead, eyes guarded but kind. "Are you Mr. Clarkson?" he asked, voice low and steady. "Yes," Henry said, cautious. The young man hesitated, then extended a trembling hand. "I'm Daniel. Rachel was my mother." Time stopped. Henry's heart seemed to forget how to beat. The porch light buzzed above them, and the sound of rain filled the void between breaths. I think you should come in," Henry managed. He stepped aside and Daniel entered, dripping quietly onto the welcome mat. Henry fetched a towel, hands shaking, and offered it wordlessly. Daniel took it with a quiet, "Thank you." They sat in the living room, the old floorboards groaning under the weight of this new reality. Henry looked at the man, who sat before him. The curve of his nose, the shape of his chin, something in his posture, it was all achingly familiar. "She never told me she was pregnant," Henry said softly. Daniel nodded. "She didn't know she was, or at least, that's what I've been told." Henry listened as Daniel explained. After Rachel's death, he had been adopted by a family in Lexington. His adoptive parents were kind, private people who didn't speak much of the past. It wasn't until Daniel turned 28 and his adoptive mother passed away that he found a shoebox of letters in the attic. Letters Rachel had written but never sent. Most were addressed to "my little one," Daniel said, but one was to you. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a creased envelope. Henry took it with reverence, as though it might vanish if he blinked. Inside, in Rachel's flowing handwriting, was a letter Henry read silently. "Dad, I know things were hard between us, and I'm sorry for the times I shut you out. I want you to know I still remember the bedtime stories, the walks in the woods, the way you held my bike when I was scared to fall. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I'm trying to become someone you'd be proud of. And if anything ever happens to me, please don't stay angry. Please remember the love too. Always, Rachel." Tears rolled down Henry's cheeks, mixing with the raindrops still clinging to his sweater.
"She wrote about you,"
Daniel said. "Said you were complicated, but you loved fiercely. I had to meet you." Henry couldn't speak. He simply reached forward and touched Daniel's hand. Later, after mugs of tea and more silence, Daniel asked, "Do you have any photos of her?" Henry nodded. He rose and returned with an album, leather-bound, edges worn. Inside were pictures of Rachel at every age, laughing on Christmas morning, swimming in Lake Erie, sitting on Henry's shoulders at a county fair. Then, without a word, Henry walked to the side table and pressed the button on the answering machine. "Hey, Dad, it's me. Just wanted to say I love you. Call me back when you can." Daniel listened, his eyes welling. "She had a beautiful voice," he said. Henry whispered, "She did." And for the first time in years, the house no longer felt quite so empty. Over the next few weeks, Daniel visited often. He asked questions about Rachel, her childhood, her quirks, her laugh. Henry opened up in ways he hadn't in years. One evening, Daniel asked, "Why did you never call her back?" Henry hesitated. "I didn't know she left the message. Not until after the accident. I didn't check my machine until the next day. And by then, she was gone." Daniel nodded solemnly. "She told me she always hoped you'd forgive yourself for being hard on her, that you did the best you could." Henry looked at him, eyes full of tears. "I don't know if I deserved that." "None of us do," Daniel replied. "But she loved you anyway." That night, Henry did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He sat at his desk and wrote a letter to Rachel. "I miss you every day. I wish I'd said more, hugged you longer, listened better, but you were my joy. Always. Love, Dad." He placed it in the drawer beside her sketchbook. Henry began spending more time outside. He taught Lily how to whistle with a blade of grass. He started going back to church, sitting quietly in the last row. Daniel helped Henry digitize the old voicemail. "So it's never lost," he said. They even planted a cherry blossom tree in Rachel's memory in the town park. Henry donated the bench beside it. The plaque read, "Her voice still echoes." Every Sunday they'd sit there together, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. One day Lily came running to the bench, holding a cassette tape. "What's this?" she asked. Henry smiled. "That's how we used to save messages, before phones got smart." "Can we listen to it?" They did. Rachel's voice filled the air. "Hey, Dad, it's me." Lily tilted her head. "She sounds nice." "She was," Henry replied. "She really was." In the fall of that year, Henry's health began to decline. He told Daniel, "I'm not afraid, I just don't want her voice to disappear." Daniel promised, "It won't. I'll make sure Lily hears it. Her kids, too." In his final days, Henry asked Daniel to record one last message. "To my Rachel, thank you for loving me even when I didn't know how to show it. You were the best part of me. And to Daniel, thank you for bringing her back to me. In you, I found her again." Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep. At the funeral, Daniel played both voicemails. The church was silent. Then, the tears flowed. Years later, Lily, now a teenager, visited the cherry blossom tree. She brought her own daughter. They sat on the bench, listening to an old digital player. Rachel's voice. Henry's voice. Love captured in echoes. The voicemail he never deleted had become a legacy. And on that bench, surrounded by blossoms and birds, a new generation listened. Because sometimes, the things we leave behind aren't just things, they're bridges. He never answered the call, but he never erased it either. And in that one message, a daughter's love, a father's regret, and a grandson's discovery, a legacy lived on. Because in the end, we're all just voices waiting to be heard. And sometimes, the voicemail we never delete becomes the story that never fades. Liddy Collins.